Podcasts. Welcome to the Games Explained podcast, where we talk about board games and we talk about Beanie Babies. Worth it? Worth it. We're your hosts,
Dan,
Ben,
and Matt. How our podcast works is we start by talking about games we've played recently. Then we'll talk about the topic of the day, which today is games with few pieces. Ooh, my. And then we'll talk about games we wish existed. So Ben, why don't you kick us off? What have you been playing lately?
lately I've been playing a decent amount of Sushi Go, which is, for those that aren't familiar, it's a pass and play game. So everyone has a hand of cards, and you need to take out a piece of sushi as one of the cards and add it to your meal in front of you and pass the remainder of the cards to the person next to you. Everyone's playing simultaneously, so it goes pretty quickly. You get a little bit of a taste of what's coming up or what other people might have access to, and so you can kind of try and sabotage or plan for the future that way. And it plays in 3 rounds of getting a hand of 7 or 10 cards or something like that. And everything stacks up, and so you can kind of have some chance to redeem yourself each round, and there's certain cards that last between them. It's a nice, simple, quick game that keeps everyone engaged. It's nice.
The last time that we introduced this game to a group of friends, they're like pretty intense gamer people. We introduced it to them, and they really enjoyed it. But the comment of one of them was like, "Oh, this is a simple little nothing game." As they were playing it, it was like,
harsh. Wow.
Meaning to say, like, oh, this is like it's pretty chill. Like, you could be competitive with it, but like you don't need to like really push yourself, and it's easy to play, and it's like 15 minutes from start to finish. But her way of summing that up was, it's a simple little nothing game. It's very funny. But yes, that is a great game. Very aesthetically pleasing artistry on the cards. Each of the little nigiri are smiling back at you as you lay them out on your tray to consume them.
It's ironic giving a piece of food that used to have a face a different face.
Yes, totally.
When I play
awesome.
Sushi Go, I have to set the meta. So at the beginning, like, go for the sashimi, go for the expensive green ones, because basically only one person can go for the green ones in a certain round. And if you establish yourself as the one who's getting green on the first round, the second round, you can probably pick up some nice things before you start going for green, because everyone's going to be like, oh, there's no point competing. Like, they're just going to go green again.
Interesting.
That's a risky move. See, you got to go dumplings.
Yeah, that's pretty risky.
You got to go dumplings, because dumplings do not... It doesn't matter how many you have. You still get points, but they get exponentially better as you get more of them. So you get 1, you get 1 point. You get 2, you get 3 points. 3 is like 6 or something. Goes up to like 15 points. It's amazing.
There is the risk there, though, that everyone's got the same plan, though. They figure, like, this gets me something no matter what. I feel like I'm halfway between you guys. I go for the ones that are the you need 3 of them together or whatever, and I just try and grab them as fast as possible, and then I mellow out and just grab whatever little points I can get here and there afterwards.
Big risk.
You gotta, dumplings are non-committal.
Yeah, that's how I live my life, apparently. It's not Sushi Go. Well, I take that back. Sushi Go is not an emulation of how I live my life. Sushi Go is how I play Sushi Go.
It's like, we play games to live a fantasy, right? In my fantasy life, I'm just not
I can't make decisions.
in
my fantasy life. In my real life, I make all kinds of decisions. I don't remember who in my family has this wonderful device, but I inherited a giant, like 3-foot tall cribbage board, which is basically an end table, from my grandma or my great uncle or something. And so my dear wife and I have been playing a good deal of cribbage lately, and the pegs are like the size of my finger. It's very nice. We drag it outside now that there's nice weather here in the peg, as we call it. It's like 25 degrees outside. You sit out with a nice iced beverage,
Is
and
it? Does it have legs? Like,
it
is it
has.
furniture?
It's basically furniture. Like it's giant, and
Yeah, it's like a
it's
side
like
table.
yeah, it's like a side table. It's like maybe 10 inches wide and like 4 feet long, and it snakes around in the middle, and it's super cool. And we also used to play it with these giant like I don't know 10 inch like playing cards, but it's a little unyieldly just to fit the aesthetic of the playing on this giant cribbage board. But it's really hard to hold a hand of cards when they're like bigger than your actual hand is.
I love the
I can
cribbage.
imagine.
Cribbage, we feel like it needs that counting board. Like you have to move pegs if you're playing cribbage. You could play
Yeah.
with a pen and a piece of paper, but it makes it like it solidifies it in our mind as a special card game because you
Oh
have
yeah.
these fancy, elaborate boards.
I think that's hilarious. Yeah,
It's how to
it's
stand out.
totally true. Every time I find that every time I play cribbage, I need to relearn the rules because the scoring it feels like sometimes the scoring is just so whack, and it doesn't seem terribly intuitive how it scores. It's like I remember there's pairs and I remember that there's 15s, but beyond that it's like I could say anything and the people I'm playing with would believe me, and vice versa. So,
And if the jack shows up here, it's this person's point. And if it shows up here, it's
exactly.
2 points for that person. And the suit matters in this case, but not in this case.
You nailed it. And that could be a total farce, and I totally believe you right now.
Cribbage.
Yep.
I recently got introduced to a game called, and this is I'm told the proper Latin pronunciation, which is ExLibris,
Nailed it.
which is a game where you're a librarian.
Aw.
Isn't that delightful? And this game tickles me because it uses lots of different parts of my brain at the same time. So it's a worker placement game, but the places you place your worker change each round. Some of them stick around, and the points that you get aren't just like tokens, points, whatever. They are specific bookshelves where the types of book have different values for you and for other people, and it's different for this game. And where you place them in front of you spatially matters almost more than anything. So if your bookshelf is stable, you get more points. If it has like a solid, you can draw a nice big rectangle in there, you get more points. If they are ordered A through Z properly, you get more points. Within the letters, there's a numbering. So there's like three
Like Dewey
A's.
Decimal?
It's not Dewey Decimal. It's just a single digit. I would not be surprised. And so every single book has a proper place in your shelf, and but you have to build beside a card you already have. So if you have an A and you have a C, you might want to play your C just so you get it down, because it's like it's tough to get opportunities to place cards down. So you want to when you can, but maybe you'll get a B. So how long do you wait? How much do you mess up your shelf?
Now, do you have to play all the cards that end up going through your hand or whatever, or can you choose not to if it'll mess up your point scoring?
You can just hold on to cards. I think as many as you want for however long you want. So it's a valid strategy in the first round to just hoard cards and then hope that there are places for your workers to be placed where you can play more than one card.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's beautiful and fascinating, and there aren't too many rules other than the specific ones on the places where you place workers, but the core of the game is pretty straightforward. Yeah, ExLibris.
Nice. Is this one of the big bundle of Kickstarter games that you got?
No, this is a friends game.
Oh, okay. I'm curious as to how that stack is. Have you gotten through? I think there were 6 of them, right? Of those Kickstarter games that you got.
Yes. So we've played Ship Shape, which
Uh-huh.
we talked about on a previous podcast. Go check out
Yeah.
the podcast, youtube.com/gamesexplained. But many of those games are still in the cellophane, as it were,
Mm-hmm.
just
Mm-hmm.
waiting for
Waiting
a
for
rainy day.
the perfect moment.
Well, that's a perfect segue that brings us right into our topic of the day, which is games with very few pieces. Ooh. So
Huh.
I'm curious. I'm curious about games that have very few pieces. How do you get complex mechanics out of a game with very few pieces? Can it still be beautiful? Can it still be interesting? Can there still be strategy?
How many pieces are we talking here? Because I have some kind of idea in my head, but I'm wondering if it's the same wavelength as you here.
Oh, let's say like a standard deck of cards, like 52, would be too many. That would be lots of pieces.
Okay, because a lot of the games that I'm thinking of are like a deck of cards. Because I mean, it's like that's a compact game, but there's a lot of pieces technically to that game. But you're talking
Well,
like a handful of pieces, meaning like a dozen ish
Maybe like
or so.
under 30.
Yeah, okay.
yeah, I mean, it's definitely a continuum, but yeah. One game that I'm sort of thinking of that might be towards that upper bound, and is kind of a card game, but Love Letter. It's definitely a very compact game. It comes in a little pouch, but there's only what, like 20 cards or something, and then maybe like 10 or 15 little wooden blocks, something like that. Maybe a couple other pieces.
Hmm.
And that's a reasonably complex game. It's a lot of like card counting you have to do, and you have to know, like, okay, someone played this card, that could mean that they have this other card that forced their hand to play the first card. And yeah, so there's a decent amount of complexity there just from that, memorization perspective.
Yeah, and a
Mm-hmm.
fair bit of like deductive reasoning required
Yeah.
to play it.
Because I haven't played Love Letter, but I get the impression that there's enough pieces that your moves have some secrecy, but you're also somewhat able to card count. It's not so overwhelming that you can't strategize in that way.
Right, yeah, because you play through the entire deck as part of your game, so you know what
Oh,
cards
okay.
exist for everybody, and you
Minus
know what
one,
everyone
I
has
think.
played. -1? Okay, that makes
Yeah.
sense for keeping it a little bit more tougher to just explicitly count it. But
Mm-hmm.
But often, like, you won't get to the end, so you'll know,
yeah,
oh, we've already seen the princess. Oh, we've already seen the king.
Here's a game that has 16, 17, 18, 19 pieces, and it's called Boggle.
Oh, Boggle.
Because Boggle has 16 dice is plural, has 16 dice. I confused myself.
Dices, I
Yeah.
believe.
Yes, Deeses. Deese. Anyway, it has 16 dice. It has a thing that holds the dice in its 4x4 grid. It has the lid to that, so you can put it on and shake it up. And it's got a timer. Oh, and I guess you got like pads of paper and pencils for you to write down stuff if you need to. So more than 19. But that game has like the fact that there are 16, like the main pieces that we're talking about with that game are the 16 dice. But what makes that game complex in its simplicity is the fact that each of those 16 dice, I think, are slightly different from each other. Each of them have 6 different sides to them. And so the permutations you can get from shaking around this thing and ending up with all these different options, let alone where they end up spaced in all of the different potential spaces on the grid. I mean, the chances of getting the same layout from shaking it one time to the next are so tiny that you could play unique games of Boggle every time you play it.
Oh,
So
let's do that math. Let's do that math.
do it.
So if
I
there's six faces on 16 dice, that would be 6 to the
uh-huh
power of 16 options. But spatially,
uh-huh
that complicates it a whole bunch because they influence each other then. So you have to.
I think it's 16 factorial times that previous number.
Right, because that, you could have that permutation, but it could be shifted into a different position.
Oh, then you'd
in
have
16
to
factorial different ways, right?
Some of them you'd have to divide by like 4 for the symmetries or something.
Yeah, it definitely is a complicated thing.
Check the show notes for the answer to our question.
No, we can't. I'm not going to take that time. Comment
if you want to see it. Let us know, and maybe we'll do an editorial about it.
Yeah, there you
go. Here's another classic game that has very few pieces. And I believe I'm pronouncing this correctly because there's an exclamation point at the end. But it's the game. Sorry!
Yeah, you have to scream it.
I believe.
Thank you for not screaming in the mic, though. Yes.
So that game, each player has 2. I'm going to call them meeples, even though they are older than the term meeple. And then 2 dice for everyone to share. And I think that's that. Or are there cards in Sorry? How long has it been since I played Sorry?
I don't think so.
Man, I don't think I've ever played that
things
game.
that they had to move around. But maybe I'm thinking of a different game. It's a game where there's like a whole bunch of variations on it, right? It's like over 100 years old or something. So
yeah, there is I just googled a picture of it. There is a deck of cards. So
I take everything I said back.
You've been foiled.
I take my pronunciation back.
A very vanilla house rules version of the game where you lost the deck of cards could be a simple game. And there's 4 pieces per person.
4? Like 4 on the board at a time?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, that's like almost backgammon levels of decision making.
Yep.
I'm joking, but I'm also not joking. It's basically backgammon because you roll, but then you choose which one you want to move.
Right.
Yeah, that's true.
I didn't realize Sorry was just backgammon.
Sorry for breaking it to you.
While we're on the trend of older games, I feel like there's a lot of stuff that's, a lot of older games had that simplicity that could go with just a few pieces, like, snakes and ladders kind of thing. But there's also like that whole genre of games that's like pen and paper games where literally you just need a pen and paper or maybe a couple pieces of paper and a couple pens. Games like dots and squares where you have a grid of like 10 by 10 dots and you take turns drawing lines and trying to complete boxes and going. That one I feel like is a game that has a reasonable amount of complexity even though it's just pen and paper.
Yeah, tic-tac-toe, telestrations, all those good things.
Monikers.
I don't know that I've ever played that.
Oh, or the bowl game. It would be called the bowl game as well. There's a few other like localized.
Oh, sure, yeah.
It's the game where you act out different characters, and then there's more and more restrictions for how you can portray information.
Of course,
until
yes.
It's just your head poking out over the back of a couch, and you can't use any sound or any part of your body that's not your head. It's great. It's so much fun.
I have some travel versions of a couple games, which are nothing like the original game, but have very few pieces. They come in these. I have 2 of them. I have a Monopoly travel version and a Scrabble travel version, and basically, it comes in this like very small flat cylinder of like plastic, and you open the lid, and there's this little board in it. So let's talk about this Monopoly thing first of all. It's got this little board in it. So it has these 12 dice, and on the different sides of this dice are different values or different colors. Like, so for example, the board that you put, it's this board that has dice holes in them where you put the dice in, kind of similar to where you put the dice into the Boggle board, except some of the dice holes are colored. For example, dark blue for the Boardwalk Park Place equivalent. Doesn't say those, but it just has dark blue. Or like brown and purple for the cheap ones, And then the sides of the dice have the different colors in it, and the colors have the value of a Monopoly in that color represented in it. And it's basically like a what do you call that kind of game where you keep rolling and risking until you decide to opt out? It's like chicken with dice. I don't
Like a
know.
push your luck.
Yeah, it's a push your luck game. So and some of the sides are the guy blowing the whistle, like go to jail. So you can keep rolling the dice as many times as you want, and whenever you want, you can put the dice into the sections on the board. And once you have enough to make a monopoly in that section, you make the value of that monopoly, but you don't make any money if you don't complete it. And there's different mechanics for chance dice being up on the dice and like hotels and stuff. But yeah, if you get 3 policemen, then your turn is over. You get 0 money, and it's the next person's turn. You scrap the board and go again. So you just take turns pushing your luck and making money each round. It's nothing like actual Monopoly, except that it uses the colors.
Like your next turn doesn't depend on your previous turn at all.
No, you just push your luck on your turn, and when you decide to opt out and cash in, you opt out and cash in.
Oh,
but yeah, that being said, yeah, you have 12 dice and you have this board, and that's all you get.
Well, I'm gonna one up your game, and by one up I mean 10 down, because this game is Pass the Pigs, which is basically identical to what you described, but only 2 dice, and those dice are pigs, and that's it.
Okay.
It's just push your luck. You roll these pigs based on how they are tiny pig figurines. Based on how they land, they're with different points, and you push your luck. That's it.
Wow.
It's so good. Or for a more modern version, there's a Sutaku. Which
excellent
is
pronunciation. You're very cultured this episode.
I'm doing my best. I'm doing my very best. So that's kind of the same, but you have more dice, and you roll some of them and stack them, and then roll some more and stack them on top. And each time, the numbers have to be going up. So each time you place a die, there are fewer numbers you could roll that still fit on top. And then you push your luck that way.
I mean, basically any game that is like this, where you're rolling dice in this way, like the most universal example would be Yahtzee, right? You have 5 dice and you just pass them around, and it's the same kind of thing. Like you're hoping for this combination of dice to fill up this combination that you're looking for to make points, and you have to make that combination before the game is over. But all you really need are those 5 dice and something to record your results on.
Have either of you ever played a game where I think one person has 1 or 2 dice and they are rolling them as fast as they can, and the next person in the circle has a pen and is frantically trying to write numbers from 1 to 100 on a piece of paper? Everyone has their own piece of paper, but there's one pencil. And then when you roll the right number on your dice, you grab that pencil and frantically start, like, continue writing the numbers 1 to 100. And whoever gets to 100 first wins. Have you played that game?
I mean, this does sound extraordinarily familiar. Isn't it like Mennonite something?
Mennonite something. I don't know. I can't remember the name.
It's like Mennonite gambling. I know, because it's like, ooh, Mennonites don't gamble or something like that, you know?
That game, playing as a teenager, is hilarious because it's a little violent. Like, you're getting that pen. It is now your pen.
Yeah.
And if it's your turn to roll those dice, you are like, you're not casually giving the dice to the next person. You do not care. You're grabbing that pen, and it's up to them to like crawl over and get those dice and go back and start, or roll them wherever they happen to be, to get that number, and then grab the pen. Most frantic way of writing numbers from 1 to 100 I've ever experienced.
So just to clarify, is there one set of numbers being written, or does each person have their own set of numbers?
Each person has their own set of numbers.
Gotcha.
It is a race.
That does sound extraordinarily familiar. It's like a youth group thing to do. We got a lot of good examples of games where we don't use much, and there is definitely a common theme in it. In that most of those have dice involved
Oh,
in
interesting.
making them few pieces.
Even Boggle.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
not
special
dice in the
dice
traditional
is
sense. Yeah, exactly. I mean, okay, in Past the Pigs, do you use like actual pigs? Like little pig figurines, or what are you using?
They are little pig figurines. They're a little bit squishy.
but they're designed to sit on 6 different sides, though, right? Maybe not quite as evenly.
Oh, what are the ways? So they can
Probably
be
like
on
statistically.
one side, which doesn't have a dot, and the other side, which does have a dot, and then they're standing up, and then there's up on the snout, and then there's diagonally up on the snout. And it's fun because the odds are totally different. Like diagonally
Yeah,
up on the snout, when that happens, you rejoice because you hit the
yeah,
jackpot.
that's got to be pretty rare.
That's great.
So a game with very few pieces that does not have dice or randomness is Quarto. So Quarto is kind of like tic tac toe. So it's a 2-player game, but it's on a 4x4 grid. And instead of you playing X's and your opponent playing O's, there is an array of 16 pieces, which are all unique. There's 4 properties, and every combination is shown. So 4 times 4 is 16. And what's unique is that you don't pick which piece you play. You pick which piece your opponent will play. And your goal is to get a line of matching pieces.
So there's some property about them that matches.
Yeah, so they have those 4 properties. So there's shape, color, fill, height.
That sounds like 4 properties to me.
Oh yeah, I said fill. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so if you get four in a row that are all the same color, then you win. But your opponent chose which piece you're going to play. You just choose where it goes.
So okay, so when you start playing, the grid is blank, and you have all 16 options available to you.
Yep. And so you
and it doesn't matter if I am the person who plays the winning piece, I win. It's not like I am X's and you are O's, or
Right.
I am this
That's
type of fill and you are this type of fill.
You just need to be the person who completes a line.
Interesting.
So it's got some Connect 4 qualities to it there.
Uh-huh. Oh, it's nice. So it's deterministic. Like there's no random elements. The random element is your opponent. There's only 16 pieces on a board, but a large amount of variability and strategy.
That's cool. My favorite part about that is that like you said, chance doesn't really play a role in it, except in maybe playing rock, paper, scissors beforehand to see who starts playing.
Yep.
All right, what do we want to see in this world of games where we only use 1 or 2 or 16 or 40 pieces?
Oh, well, I'm curious how much strategy you can get out of very few pieces. So if we go all the way to 1 piece, we get spin the bottle, which there's excitement, but there's no strategy. Like it's not really like it's not really a game. So maybe 1 piece is too tough.
Well, I mean, but there with the pen and paper games, it's possible. Like you can end up having drawing your board game out and your pieces out on the paper. Like there's ways that you can use a piece and extend its utility in a game in creative ways.
Yeah, like you have the ability in that case to adapt it such that it can be many things, basically, but it's still one thing.
And maybe a pen is a bit cheating there because you can use it to make whatever you want, essentially. But
maybe, yeah, that's a continuous system.
Yeah, I mean, then you could think about when we talk about games where you have, for example, like we said with Boggle, where there's dice with 16 unique dice, each with unique sides. Well, does each side count as a piece in this game? Because they're all different from each other. You know what I mean? Like it's the same thing where I'm gonna start again because Matt's looking at me funny.
I'm so
I'm
skeptical.
gonna rephrase what I'm saying. You could have a game where you have two pieces to play it, a pen and a piece of paper, but you could make like almost anything with it. Well, you could have a game where you have two dice, but there are 6 sides to each dice. So is that really like 12 pieces? Like in that you can combine them in different ways to do something different? Is that cheating in our sense of the word of games with few pieces?
So I think what you're talking about is like what would be the most interesting game with the fewest states?
Right.
Mhm.
Right. Because yeah, like it's the complexity that makes Boggle interesting. If there were only 16 letters and you just mixed up 16 letters in a 4x4 grid, that would be much less interesting than being able to have all that much more variety.
And like a pen and paper, or especially a pencil and paper, you have pretty much limitless possibilities. But if you go for a light bright, now you have discrete dots and discrete colors. And so even though it's still millions and trillions of possibilities, it's it's narrowed down a bit.
Mhm. Well, I think that's interesting that the number of states in the elements themselves is one thing, but a lot of the games that we came up with, there's a certain element of the creativity or the randomness of the other player that is a factor, like the having a few tiles and picking a tile for the other person, or rolling the dice and determining when to stop and that kind of thing. There's a lot of ways that just having that human factor be emphasized in the game can help lead to a lot more variation and complexity, even if what's on the table is very simple.
Yeah, coup would be a good example of that, where there are only like 3 cards per roll and 5 rolls or something. And the intricacy comes from players' behavior because it's a bluffing game. So you can do the action of the hidden card you have, and you know what it is, but you could pretend to have a different card and do that action and hope no one calls you out on it.
Mm-hmm.
And so the play space of the player's mind has a lot more states than just the board itself. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So maybe we could make a simple game that's like poker, but with like 10 cards, where you're bluffing with like a very limited amount of information. That's basically what coup is.
That's what Skull is.
What's skull?
The card game Skull. You can play it with a standard deck of cards, or you can support the designers. I encourage that. But each person has 4 cards. 3 of them are red; those are roses, and one is black. That's a skull. And basically, you take turns putting cards from your hand face down on a stack in front of you, and at some point, someone starts bidding, which is a bid to see how many cards they can flip over without getting a skull. So most of the cards that exist are roses, so your odds are pretty good, but players are pretty motivated to put a skull in, and you bluff. So even if I have 1 card in front of me, it's a skull, I can still start the bid at 2. And then the next person will think, oh, he's bidding. Probably he put down a rose. I'm going to bid 3. And that's almost all the rules of the game. If you get called on your bluff, you lose one of your cards. It might be random, or it might be you choosing if it was your own bluff that was called or whatever.
That's great.
2 points.
Yeah. At that point, you are treating the other person's brain as a piece of the game as well. Which adds all kinds of variety, because you could play against many different people and they all think differently and they all have different strategies and different ways of different levels of risk taking and different ways of showing their tells and all these things too.
Different amounts of stamina. I've played with younger kids who just want to get the bid all the time because it's the most interesting thing to do.
That's like winning to them sometimes.
So good.
Winning the bid,
So it's just
even if it
low
means
bids constantly.
picking up a skull.
Oh, I'll talk about one final game if we have time.
Yeah.
Just kidding. We do. It's a podcast. Like, where are you going? You're like on a bus or something. It doesn't matter. Just hit pause. I don't care. We have lots of time. It's 2 rooms and a boom.
Yeah.
So it's a social deduction game, and each player has 1 card, which is their role for this whole 10-minute game. You have 1 card, and then there's 1 card for 1 room and 1 card for the other room for the leader, and that's it. Keep track of time on your phone, and that's it.
Yeah, that's true. And you're just like, basically all it is I have a role, and I'm figuring out other people's roles, and that's all you need.
And like, who do you trust? Who do you talk to? Is that person acting shifty? Are they acting shifty because they want me to think they're acting shifty, but really they're on my team, but they don't want me to know yet?
So, we've talked about how like the human element is can be a really interesting factor in these, low element games. I'm curious if there's a way that a game could exist where there is a heavy focus on the small amount of things that exist in the game. Like, I'm thinking of something where the people are using the meeples. They still have agency in the game, and so it's not fully deterministic like snakes and ladders kind of thing, but something where like you each have a meeple on the table, similar to 2 rooms and a boom, where like you have the card. You just have the one piece that you're interacting with, and somehow you have to like have a race to the end of a thing, but you have to, the last one there wins or something, like where you have to do something interesting where you have to compete with the person in how you get there.
You could have a game with very few pieces if you add a physical component. Like, you could play Candyland, but instead of rolling that die, you arm wrestle. It's the most manly version of Candyland, I think.
Yeah, exactly. You play slaps with each other's forearms until somebody gives up. and you only play one round of Candyland, and then it's over. So it seems like mechanics-wise, most of these few pieces games, there's something else. It's a random element, or it's a player's psychology, or it's something dexterity based, or something that adds variety to that piece or extra utility to that piece, because otherwise you'd have a very stale and solved game, right? If you have few pieces and not much to do with them, that doesn't stay a game for very long, because you're going to find out a dominant strategy, and that's going to be what you do all the time, and it will be very interesting. But to find some way to make it competitive despite the small number of things that you're dealing with, I think is what makes these games special and worth playing.
Yeah, it doesn't take much to make a compelling experience. It doesn't take a lot of equipment. Well, that's our podcast. Thanks for listening in. You can find us at youtube.com/gamesexplained and see our rules videos and all our other stuff. Tune in next time when we talk about games and we talk about stationary bicycles. Where you going? See you next time.